Welcome to the Town and Country Podcast, two churches, one ministry. I am your host, Jonathan Illian, and we're happy you chose to join us again for this wonderful podcast we're doing. And as usual, we have Pastor Kapanka. You're first. How about that? Pastor Kapanka.
You caught me off guard with that.
Well, I said that I would introduce you at one point first. So, Pastor Kapanka, hello. You are the pastor at Immanuel Lutheran in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Hello, sir.
Good morning, John. Good morning, Kevin.
Now it threw the whole thing off, didn't it? Now we're just completely off kilter. Pastor Kevin Richter, who is the pastor at St. John's Lutheran in Rhinebeck, Iowa. Hello, sir.
Good morning. You're the one who has to edit if we tongue-tied and messed up. So
Exactly.
It's your own fault.
Yes. No, I leave all the mistakes in, so I think we're good. So
mistakes. Who makes mistakes?
Mistakes? I don't realize that people make mistakes. No way. So we have wrapped up the conversation on the 10 Commandments and as a part of our Living Lutheran series. And the next episode, not this one, but the next one, we're going to start talking about the creeds. But in this episode, we're going to take a little bit of a side note, and we're going to talk about the youth gatherings. Now, the youth gatherings happen once every 3 years, and those youth gatherings can be quite profound. They can change your life. They really can. I've been there. I've seen it. But we're going to talk about those and, kind of discuss that type of thing. And Pastor Kevin, you are up, sir.
Yeah, so we're getting ready here in just a few 16 days to get ready to leave for the youth gathering, or 15 days now. Yeah, so just thought it'd be an awesome opportunity to stop and talk about it, remind people we're taking our youth from both St. John's and Immanuel. In fact, we have two other churches joining us, so we have 15 kids and 7 adults all traveling together and going down to New Orleans for the Endure youth gathering theme for this year. And so pretty excited about it. We're getting ready for that, but just want to take some time and think about, I know Pastor Kapanka's been to like 10 of these things. And
well, he's 162.
Yeah.
So, he's got a couple
30
of
times 3 is 90.
Well,
He's
Moses,
still under
Moses
that age.
was our first keynote speaker.
That's right, yeah. So, I've been to several myself, and I've got some fun experiences to talk about. I figured you'd have some fun experiences to talk about, so I got some questions to grill you.
Okay.
What was your first experience with a youth gathering? It used to be National Youth Gathering. Now they just call it the Youth Gathering.
My first youth gathering was in 1992, before you were born, I think. And it was
I'd have
originally...
been 4.
You'd been 4, okay. It was originally in New Orleans, and so we were at New Orleans. And I had never been to one before and anything like this. So it was an amazing group. We had about 20 kids come from the congregation I was serving. And what profoundly remember about that gathering was a tragic event. We were about the 3rd day of the youth gathering, and we gathered for the mass event, which is what happens in the evenings where 22,000 people are gathered together, and we were in the Superdome. And Tom Rogers was our keynote speaker, pastor from New Orleans at that time. And he made the announcement that a young boy from Iowa had been running up the stairs and had a heart attack and died. And just the profound nature of that reality, bringing together life and death and the promise of resurrection and the impact that it had on our young people. I will never forget that moment, to have to share with all of these kids that one of their own, 15-year-old kid, just wasn't coming home to his parents. I will never forget that moment. It was really profound.
Yeah.
Not when you think of youth gatherings.
No, but those are powerful moments because it is an opportunity to see how the gathering leaders, and they're all top dogs, in our synod that are theologically trained and do ministry day in and day out, and to watch them recover or just to handle a situation like that. I've seen not that extreme, but other ones where they're just Johnny on the spot. They use that opportunity to talk about it. They don't shy away from it, and yeah, that's I won't say cool, but that's interesting. That your first one you go to, that's what happens.
Did any of you go to the one in Colorado? It was like right after that one. That was the one.
The Red Rock,
Red-
Colorado was the one before that in '89.
Okay. Then
I
that's
had just been ordained about 6 weeks before, so I got to the congregation and they already had their plans going, so I did not attend. But
yeah, I went.
members of our congregation were at that.
I went to that one, and that one, if you don't know, had they had a big storm that rolled through at this big outdoor amphitheater, and we got hailed on, and the buses, they wouldn't send the buses up because they didn't want the buses to get damaged. It was really bad, so there were lots of people with abrasions and contusions, things like that. And again, they brought it right back to that exact same thing. They brought up the fact that, hey, life is not supposed to be just the mountaintop experience. Sometimes at the mountaintop you will have
Yeah.
some bad things that happen. So
Yeah, and I know Barb Ranking was at that one, and she talks about, these kids huddled together trying to hide from the hail, and they just started praying with each other and just,
Yep.
just seeing it really come together.
yep, and the adults were standing there covering the kids. They were putting their own bodies out there to get the hits instead. And so yeah, that was
Hmm.
profound.
We need to make sure that we don't leave the impression that youth
Yeah.
gatherings just about tragedies.
Right, yeah. They're
It's
unsafe to go to.
Yeah,
Don't go.
please don't go. No.
No, I was just thinking, like, now I'll know how many years you've been ordained because I was 1 when you were ordained. So I just take my age minus 1, and I'll know how many years you've been in ministry. See?
14.
Yeah,
14.
No, for me, my first experience was 2006 when I was in high school. And, for me, coming from a small congregation, once we were confirmed, that was it. We didn't have a youth group or anything. I was confirmed in a class of 3, and once we were confirmed, the other 2 never came back. So it was just me. But my sister had gone with some friends 3 years before that, and heard how fun it was and everything, and my older brothers had gone, and so I really wanted to go, and so Mom said, if you can find somebody to go with you, I'll go. So my buddy that actually was in my confirmation class with me, I asked him, and we agreed to go. That one was in Orlando, and so we agreed to go to Cocoa Beach and do that. So he agreed to go, and then we also went to Universal Studios, so that was fun. But so it's just the 2 of us and our 2 moms that went down, and from coming from a small town church where there's no youth group and really not a lot of other teenagers I saw that took their faith serious, and felt like I was kind of the only one who really wanted to pursue a life of following Jesus and take this serious, then to show up and worship with 20,000 other kids your age,
Yeah.
and just like the impact that had on my faith of, no, the church is so much bigger than your one little congregation, and so that was just that left a mark on me, left an impact. And then when I became a pastor and got to go, it was awesome. But it was a whole different experience because my first call was to a big church. So we were taking, 40, 50 kids with 10, 12 adults, and so it went from this group of 4 going to youth gathering and navigating to this group of 50, 60 people navigating. It was an entirely different experience.
Yes.
But it was just still so cool. What has been your favorite location?
My favorite location. Well, I've been to, like I say, other than Denver, I've been to almost all of them. I liked Atlanta. We've only been there once. It was a couple years after the Olympics, and so all the Olympic venues were still kind of up and proper. We had some great experiences with the kids, an amazing group of young people that went with us. So I think if I had to pick a site, Atlanta, although San Antonio is also cool.
Yeah.
I've been to San Antonio a couple times.
Yeah, my grandparents were in San Antonio, so I've been down there several times, the river walk and all that, but I would think that'd be
Yeah.
cool to see it packed full of kids with their backpacks and stuff.
Yep.
And I actually, I think I was thinking about this. I think my favorite one was Houston, just from a logistics standpoint, that, it worked out really well to be farther away in a hotel and make the long walk in the morning. Because if people don't know, at youth gatherings, you walk everywhere.
Yes.
And this is New Orleans, Orlando, Houston, in July. So it's hot, it's humid, it's sweaty, and you walk everywhere, miles. And so Houston was nice because you walked in the morning, you got to the convention center where you spend all day doing your Bible study, your breakout sessions, your games, all that stuff, your service opportunities. And then when it's time to go to the mass event at the big dome or stadium, it was 1 block over to the
Mhm.
baseball stadium. And then, so you didn't have to walk between the two. You just walked over. it was the first time they did assigned seating, so you didn't have to stand outside the stadium for 3 hours waiting to get your seats. You just walked in and sat in the seats they assigned you, and then you had a long walk home in the evening, and so rather than this like half walk, a long walk, and then a half walk, like it was. I just like that setup. I thought that worked really well.
Yeah, those are always kind of the hot long walks during the middle of the day. I remember the days when you'd have to sit outside the dome stadium for 2 hours to get a good seat, and it was just miserable beating heat. We had for a couple of years here at Immanuel a couple of youth directors that led down, and I would go down as one of the chaperones. They were runners, and so they just encouraged all of our group to do the 5K run. And so on those days they were at 5K, we'd get up at 4:30 in the morning. We'd walk a mile down to the start of the 5K, run a 5K, then walk back to the hotel to shower, clean up, and walk back. And by the time I had like 87,000 steps, and I'm not a young guy anymore. So I'm glad that those running days are over.
Yeah, I'll sign you up for the 5K in New Orleans.
I don't think they have them anymore for guys like me.
What's been your favorite theme? Because every 3 years they pick a new theme. It's always based on scripture. If you can remember them, it's on the backpack and the t-shirts. What's your favorite theme?
Oh man, I'm going to go back to that first one in New Orleans again. I think just because it was the first one, and I'd
Okay.
never experienced anything like that, and I can't remember the exact title of the theme, but it was something about the rising of the river, and the way Tom Rogers tied that into baptism, tied it into the passing of the young man. That was a profound one that stuck with me. They've all been amazing. It's like saying, which is your favorite child?
Yeah.
They're each one is different and unique and wonderful. To pick one as better than the others, it's too much for me. I can't do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're all good. I've just seen that like sometimes they pick ones that are big and broad,
Yeah.
and there's almost too much stuff you can do with it. Sometimes they've picked a little too narrow and it feels repetitive and stuff. But I don't know, the one that's always stuck with me was the one in Minneapolis, Real Present God, and it
Yeah.
was based on Psalm 46,
Yep.
and I thought the theme song was perfect. I thought what they did with the Bible study and the mass events hit all of life, the up, the down, the God, the human, yeah, I was really impressed with that one, and that one's always stuck with me. I can still hear that song in my head
Yeah. As soon
versus,
as you mentioned, I could hear it coming on.
yeah, some of the other ones not so much. Plus, it's a psalm, so I just love
Yeah.
the psalms. But and kind of our Lutheran Reformation Psalm 46. So yeah, I thought that one was awesome.
They
But
did a great job with the chant on that one.
Yeah.
Before the gathering, they'd had that, I don't know what you would even call it, liturgical chant.
yeah,
But that was a real present God.
yep. And then this year's Endure from Hebrews
Yes,
12.
I'm looking forward to this.
And I think it's going to be awesome. I'm
Yeah.
really excited what they're going to do because it's so cool to see. It's really talking about Christ enduring, but then reminding us we endure because he has endured, and so our endurance comes from him.
Well, I'm taking that very personal because at my age, just getting out of bed and walking to one place is an endurance event. So endure may be my last one.
Well, I also think it's funny because I was already telling the kids that like this is a great theme because you're spending a week together, you're traveling, you're hot, you're tired, you're not eating normal, you're not sleeping normal. And I said, there's going to be so many times you're going to hear me say, you just have to endure this minor inconvenience.
That's
Like,
right.
stop complaining. We're all hot. We're all hungry. Like, endure. It's
Yeah,
okay.
Just remind me of that from
Yeah,
time
that's
to time,
right.
would you?
The biggest drama queen of us all. So
Yeah, that's it.
maybe this is one, you've kind of talked on that first one, why it's so profound, but just overall, what's your favorite memory, like your favorite moment? Maybe it's connecting with a student or seeing somebody grow or, just all of it coming together.
When I think of the youth gatherings, there's two kind of moments. One is a specific, one's more generic. Again, I'm going to go back to that very first one. I had a young gal from our congregation that came there. She was maybe a sophomore, junior in high school. Kind of quiet and shy and really nice, sweet young lady. And I remember the last gathering, we were gathering for worship and we're sitting down, and she comes up to me in a shy way and asks if a boy could sit with us to worship. And I was kind of surprised because I just didn't think of her as in that phase of life yet. And so this young man sat with her, very nice, very good. 3 years later, I performed their wedding. So I thought that is a memory I will remember, that she met her boyfriend, her future husband. And now I see them from time to time at youth gatherings, bringing their own kids.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing event. So that is one that I'll always stick with me. But in a generic sense, I absolutely cherish the times of those walks when we're walking between the gathering and the dome or the convention center, because I try to make an effort to spend some quality time with each one of the kids and just have a conversation. We're going through this together, and just to get to know them at a level that you don't see them, in youth group or even in church. There's a bonding that happens through that process, and I thoroughly enjoy. And that's what I take away the most, is those times that I get with individual students, and kids walking back and forth, or sitting in the hotel room, or just waiting for dinner. Those conversations, because they may be about a session they just attended, something that profoundly, it may be a question they're dealing with in life, or talking about their future. Those moments with the kids stay with me far longer than the events themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love the debriefing at night,
Yeah.
because everybody's tired, everybody's hot, everybody's just ready for bed, and yet you cram, 10, 15 kids in one hotel room, and you start asking them, what'd you hear today? What'd you learn today? And at first it's all superficial, but then somebody starts about something real,
Yeah.
and it just opens up for the whole group to be able to kind of let down their guard, forget the fact that we're tired, and that's why we're here for, to be able to talk about real life. And whether it's, an uncomfortable topic I wouldn't talk about with mom and dad, but all of a sudden in this room with my pastors and leaders and other kids, it's okay because I heard another adult talk about it today. Or if it's just something that's vulnerable and I've never really shared about it, but this feels like a safe space, you just watch it unfold and actually impact their lives. And I love that part of it.
Yes. So right.
One of my favorite memories, it was from the church up in Duluth, and we had 50 people on a bus. We had our own bus because we were just full. And so I think we actually flew down to New Orleans that one, and then we had a bus pick us up, and the driver of the bus company just happened to be an LCMS Lutheran from New Orleans, but worked for this bus company, and he got hired on to drive us around as the bus, and so everywhere we'd be around town, he'd see kids with their backpacks, and he'd just say, "I see Lutherans," and it's just so funny. But there was a car stalled right in the middle of like 4-lane traffic, and so it was just a nightmare. Everybody's trying to, and so he's trying to get this big old bus around, and like 8 of our high school boys said, "Let's push him out." And so they ran and jumped off the bus and pushed this car out of traffic over to a gas station to get it out to, and it was just so cool. And so our one director took a video of it and submitted to a gathering, and they played it up on the screen. And so these boys are proud of themselves, and it's like, yeah, good job. And the whole thing is clapping. And then that night during the debriefing session, we got to talk about, this idea that we do these good works not for our own glory, but for God. That the stadium clapping was not for us to feel good that look what we did. It was to say, look at what the love of Christ can do when you are faithful and honor. And so these boys that were beaming pretty big, and then we kind of tore them down, but then built them back up. That no, it's still a good work you did, but God's the one who motivated you, worked you, And so, yeah, I always thought that was fun.
The other one that kind of ties in that same thing is just at every youth gathering, I try to get like the Sunday morning newspaper, because there's almost always a article on the front page about all of these kids that have invaded their city. And it's incredible to listen and to read the local residents' response to 25, 30,000 kids invading their city. And every single one of them talks about how proud they are of these kids, how well behaved they are, what a witness and a testimony these kids make to the local community, not just the service projects which they're doing. And they recount the hundreds of service ministries going on, but the impact. And it's almost always the same way. I wish our kids and our community could be more like that. And the testimony that we, coming to a large city like a New Orleans or an Orlando or Houston, bring to that community about what it is to walk in the footsteps of Christ is a powerful thing to see too.
Yeah. Okay, last question. What's the craziest thing that's ever happened to you, someone in your group or your group as a whole?
Craziest thing ever happened to me. Well, I'm going to have to kind of rat out our one of our deacons here at the church now, because when he went as a youth, this is how old I am. He's now a deacon at the church, an elder at the church. There were just 5 of us going, 5 kids and 2 adults. And there's a pattern that happens in youth gatherings. The first couple days are high, you're excited, but then you kind of hit the barrier. You're exhausted, you're tired, you're irritable, you're all things. But those last 2 days, I always talk about, those are the days of hilarity, because you're so overtired, so exhausted, that everything you do is absolutely the most hilarious thing you've ever seen in your life, and you just break out laughing at everything. Well, our young man who went there found an umbrella with a duck head. And he carried this duck head around, and he called it Lutheran ducks, because there was T-shirts, Lutheran chick magnets. And so this was a duck head, and he still has that, and he brings it occasionally. And I'm waiting for him to show up at a deacon's meeting with us. And so he's standing on the windowsill, shouting across the road to a hotel and waving the Lutheran duck, and just kind of talking about, I'm the Lutheran chick magnet. And I can't help but see him when he's helping serve communion with his duck. And so it's not maybe totally crazy,
That's
but it's a
awesome.
memory that just sticks with your mind.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to tell you who it is, but he's a short guy.
Yeah.
You'll know it.
It does get crazy and weird. The craziest thing that happened to us was when we had the group, I think that was that same group of 52 or something. And like I said, we flew down. And so then when the gathering was over and we went to fly home, that was the day that Southwest Computers crashed and all their flights got canceled. Well, they got us on our flight from New Orleans to Atlanta. But once we got to Atlanta, they had no flights for like the next 2 days that could take a group of 50, because they were reshuffling everybody, and trying to pack every plane to make up for all these missed flights. And so we're sitting there with a group of 50 people saying, can we got to get home. We got to get these kids back to stuff. And they're just, it's going to be 2 days. It's going to be 3 days, before we can, get you back on. And so the main DCE who is leading us, she's calling every bus company, rental company, like every other airline, just trying to figure out anything. And so some of our adults took our kids down to an empty terminal airport, and they just crashed and slept. We had to go fight with the luggage office to get our luggage off that plane, because they were still going to send it. And it's like, well, if we end up here for 2 or 3 days, we need our stuff. And so they had to run the entire baggage carousel just to get all of our stuff off. And so a dad and I grabbed all the bags and put it over in the corner. And then we had to sit up all night long and guard those bags, because everybody who had, been shuffled to a different flight would come over looking for their bags and see this huge pile and think, oh, they just put all the extras over here. And we had to tell everybody, these are our bags. And they're like, yeah, right. And we're like, no, we have a group of 50 kids, and they're like, oh, okay. Well, the one guy, he was like literally digging through our bags, and it's like 3 a.m. I've been up all day, all night, so I'm tired. And I was like, dude, these are our bags. And he's like, yeah, right. And I said, no, seriously, these are our bags. And he said, who are you? Santa Claus? Only he threw an exposition in there, And I said, well, actually, I'm a pastor of a church. We have 50 kids on a youth group. And the demeanor of his face was just like, you're serious? These are your bags? And I said, yes, these are all our bags. And he's like, I'm really sorry. And he just walked away, just feeling horrible. But so we had to sit up all night. We finally at 8 a.m. got on a bus and then had to bus home from Atlanta all the way back to Minneapolis or to Duluth. Yeah. And oh man, it was just such a long ride. And then the air conditioning went out on the bus on the way home. And so we had all these hot, cranky kids that were supposed to be home 12 hours ago that are still only halfway home and sweating on a bus. But I tell you what, they did. It's just one of those times where they know what we're there for. They know we're doing everything we can to care for them. They were really well behaved. They were not grumbling too much. They took it like champs. But it was just like to sit at the DC made so much fun of me because been up all night long. And then when we went to leave the airport, I couldn't find anywhere to even get a cup of coffee. So I got on the bus. I said, do you have the correct count? And she said, yes. And I sat in the seat and I was asleep like that. And she said, we weren't even moving and you were asleep. And I was like, heck yeah, I was tired.
But
But
you and I probably could have learned from those kids last youth gathering when we were coming back on the bus, and we kind of got diverted and delayed because I don't think my attitude was
Yeah.
quite as good as the one you described.
travel plans don't always go as predicted.
And
but
I remember sitting next to you and we're like looking at each other like, this is not the way we planned it.
No, you're just ready to be home.
Yeah.
It sounds like youth group vacation, right? The
Yeah.
swing family truckster and all of that. So wonderful. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us today for the Town and Country Podcast, 2 Churches, 1 Ministry. We want to remind you to submit your questions for the topic of Ask the Pastors, which is coming up next, the next podcast. So send those to podcast@emmanuelcf.com so that we can answer those questions that are burning in your soul about how to live your life as a Christian in the world today. Special thanks goes out to our audio engineer, Mr. Dave Kaler. Once again, you have offered your expertise when we need it the most. On behalf of Pastor Kevin and Pastor Kapanka, I am your host, Jonathan Ilian, and we invite you to come back next time as we bring you the next installment of the Town and Country Podcast. Thanks again and have a great week.